Most people think the housing market is slowing down right now. But here's what data actually show. New listings just jumped over 21% from February to March in 2026, which is at higher than normal level for this time of the year. That tells us something important. The market isn't slowing down. It's actually gaining momentum going into the spring. Now, the real question is this: what does it mean for the home prices, especially here in Chandler, Arizona? So let's break it down in more detail. So let's start with the big picture. New listing in front of you right here is the data of the amount of new listing for the entire USA. Each of the columns represent a month of new listing. So if we look at March of 2026, which is about 439,000 homes available for sale in the entire US market. Right. So that jump from 362,000 in February to about 21% from February to March. Now, historically, that jump from February to March is only about 18% increase. So this jump is a little bit more than what the historical data. So compared to 2025, the new listing, looking at when you compare when you look at the green columns only, right? Those are March, right? It's slightly over 435 versus 439,000. So roughly flat, about 5% year over year. Right, what does that mean? Even in the economic uncertainty right now with all the war and everything, right? Sellers are still confident. The market is still active. If the seller is not confident about the market, they wouldn't have put their home for sale on market. And some of you might think, oh, that may be because they are panicked about the market as well, and they're afraid that the market is going to crash, and therefore they have to put their house on the market. But if that is the case, then the number should way up higher. In this situation, it's only about 5% increase when you compare to the previous year. So that's not a significant change, right? And for the matter of fact, we're talking about the entire US market as well. So that's 5% is not big compared to the whole country, right? So this is not a crash market. This is not a frozen market as well. So that shows one thing. The only thing left is the seller is still confident in this market. They're still confident that they are able to sell in this market, and therefore they still put up the home for sale on the market. Now, what do we see in Maricopa County and Arizona, right? Let's zoom into Phoenix first. Phoenix, Maricopa County first. There's a pattern most people don't realize is this. Listing is normally peaked around March of each year, 2023, 2024, 2025. Now, the 2 years, 2021 and 2022, is a little bit different, especially 2022, when the interest rate jumped from 3% to 7%, right? A lot of people panic in that market. They end up listing more in June. Well, actually, then they don't. They're afraid that they cannot sell, and therefore there's no more new listing for sale anymore, right? So that those 2 years we don't talk about in here. In here we talk about and then after it peaked in March, it's going down, and then it starts picking up in October a little bit, and then it's dropped toward the end of the year when there is no activities for sale. Meaning everyone is busy with holidays and everything, so they don't want to list their home in November and December of the year, right? What about this year? 2026 is pretty much identical with 2025, right? A little bit higher than 2023 and 24 overall. So more and more people are confident in listing their home for sale nowadays compared to 23 and 24. I believe that in this period right here, they're still afraid that if they list their home for sale, they will not be able to sell in 2023 and 2024. Versus here, 2025 and 2026, they feel more confident, and they already see the record for the last 2 years, right? They now believe that they can sell their house and the market is still moving, and therefore the inventory, the number of new inventory become more available on the market. So what about Chandler? Let's look at Chandler real quick. Chandler is a little bit different. As I told you, right? I said that for the Maricopa Park County, the peak is about March of the year. Chandler is about April. As you see here, peak in April. So what does that mean? It means that you may have another week or so to receive a lot of new inventory on the market in April, right? Because right now is 24th of April already. So you're not gonna see, you only have 1 week left to see a lot of inventory. And then they start going down. They start going down toward the end of the year, right? So this is Chandler. So Chandler inventory is, I would say, increase a little bit slower than Arizona. So if Maricopa Park County has a bigger jump, like from 8,000 to almost 10,000, that's about 20% already. The inventory here is only 300 to about 400, which is about 10-15% increase. So Chandler inventory is a little bit, new inventory is a little bit less than Maricopa as a whole, which means it's gonna be more challenging to buy a house in Chandler, which means buyers gonna facing more competition for one house that they see, right? So for seller in Chandler, you actually have a better market overall compared to every other cities in Maricopa County. For the buyers, you may have more challenge time to buy in Chandler, Arizona, right? So by the way, so before I go deeper in the topic, right, I do have a webinar coming up very soon, next week on Tuesday at 5 p.m. In this webinar, I am talking about how you get approved to buy the first house, how to understand the real monthly payment, what kind of costs you have to face as a homeowners during the months, and how to avoid overpay for the house, how to negotiate to get the best deal as a first-time home buyers. So it's called the first home approval blueprint for first-time home buyers. So click the link, scan the QR code here, and then I will be able to show you, you will be able to register. It's 100% completely free. So you don't have to pay anything to attend those information. All right, with that, let's go right next to the next information. Now, when I talk about the new inventory goes up, right, there's one question, hey, this is a lot of people afraid of the market, and therefore they go up, they put the house up for sale. And I already tell you that is not the case, because the change is not that much. The change is not that much significant. Maybe we talk about 10-20%, so it's not very significant at all, right? But some people also think, what if they list and they cannot sell? What if they list and they cannot sell? In that situation, they're gonna stuck on the market, and therefore they have to drop the price, and therefore the home value is gonna be much less in that situation. Well, you forget about one option. They can actually delist, they can actually cancel and still keep the property. Sellers are not being forced to drop the price. So in fact, here is in front of you right here is the chart that showing the number of listings that get canceled during the year. In 2025, we see those at the top. The number of cancel listing of 2025, of course, it follow the cycle, right? But of course, overall, when you compare month over month of every year, year over year of the monthly year over year, then you will see that 2025 is actually at the highest level. Now, especially here in this right here, we're talking about January of 2026, which is at the highest level of the cancellation. So instead of disprove this, the seller actually not have to adjusting the price. A lot of people actually choose the option to cancel their listing, keep the house and rent it out, or continue to live in the house, right? Who knows what they're gonna do with that? All we know is this data show that they're not just adjusting the price, they're not just negotiate, and in fact, a lot of people choose to cancel the listing and keep the house for themselves. What about Maricopa County? This is the similar chart. We actually see the peak of cancellation. This is cancellation rate. We actually see the peak of cancellation around Q2 and Q3 of 2025. And then the cancellation actually drop. Now, what does that mean? It's actually trending downward, meaning that they don't have to cancel, right? If they flat out, that means they still have to cancel, put up, cancel, put up, cancel, put up, cancel. This one is actually trending down. So a lot of people actually in Arizona, in the opposite of USA, right? Meaning they're willing to negotiate and they're willing to drop the price to get the home sold compared to the US. What about Chandler? This is another interesting data, right? Chandler is very similar to Maricopa County in terms of they get the peak of cancellation around Q2 and Q3, and since then it starts to trending down. Now, Chandler is behaving a little bit up and down more than Maricopa. This is a smoother transition. This is more up and down. And now we're talking about the scope, the steep, how steep this is. This is much more steep. More people willing to negotiate than Chandler. Well, Chandler is still willing to negotiate, but this is much less flat, much more flat compared to the Maricopa County. So either way, what we can draw from the conclusion of this is the Maricopa market, the Arizona market, the Chandler market, the seller is willing to drop the price and willing to negotiate to get the house closed, versus the US market, the entire US market, more and more people willing to cancel and keep the house. In Arizona, when they decide to sell, they're gonna sell and they're willing to negotiate. And what does that mean for the home buyers and the seller? This is a market that both sides has to have a specific strategy. You no longer rely on the market anymore. You rely on the strategy to make sure that it is a good fit for you and your family. For the buyers, you do have a chance to negotiate. Number one, you do have more inventory. So that is a very good news already. But you also, specifically in Chandler, Arizona, you have more chance to negotiate and get the deal that at the price that you want as well. But it has to be a reasonable, because keep in mind, they still have an option to just cancel, just wait for another buyers before accepting your offer, right? For the seller, you do have to be reasonable in price, because all the seller in the area is more willingly to negotiate as well for the price and for the concession and for everything to make the home sold. So if you're not willing to do so, then your home's going to get stuck, because if the buyers doesn't have the benefit, and if you're not willing to do so, then they choose another option, right? So thank you everyone for watching the video today. Like I said, I do have the first time home buyer webinar coming up on Tuesday, hopefully to look soon to see you in this webinar. I'm going to go much more deep detail about the home buying process. We're talking about financing, how to get a good foundation, financial foundation for your new home, for your first home, right? And how to negotiate to get the best deal of a real estate transaction. So thank you so much, everyone.